It's chaos in Caracas as voters erupt over Venezuela's controversial election results. We're going to see what happened over the weekend and how it's all part of a massive populist clash in Venezuela that shows no signs of ending anytime soon. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you stay sane in these insane times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Also, I want you right now to stop putting off what you know you need to do, and that is click on that link below and secure the deed to your home once and for all. I was absolutely shocked when I found out how easy it is to access the deed to my house, and not just access it, but actually change it. And the deed to your home is the only document that proves you own it. The problem is that the deeds to all our homes are now online, and criminals are free to find your deed, forge your signature, refile as the new owner of your home, take out tons of loans using your home's equity, and then they stick you with all the debt. But that's where our good friends over at Home Title Lock come in. Gang, they're amazing. Home Title Lock gives you the peace of mind that the deed to your home is absolutely and completely protected 24/7. Click on that link below right now. Use promo code Turley Talks, and all you got to do is just enter your address for your no obligation home title scan to see if you've already been a victim of deed theft. That's a $100 value, absolutely and totally free with my promo code Turley Talks. Gang, don't wait for the worst to happen only to regret that you didn't do something about it when you could have. Do what I've done. Do what countless patriots have done. Click on that link below right now and secure your home today.
Soy Nicolás Maduro Moro, presidente reelecto de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, y voy a defender nuestra democracia, nuestra ley y a nuestro pueblo.
Venezuela held its national elections yesterday in what turned out to be the toughest election yet for Venezuela's socialist president, Nicolas Maduro, who has ruled with an iron hand since 2013. The opposition campaign, led by Edmundo Gonzalez, attracted widespread support throughout Venezuela as well as abroad, most particularly from Argentina's widely popular President Javier Milei. And many were predicting that Sunday would represent nothing less than sort of the ultimate showdown between a growing anti-socialist coalition in Venezuela and Maduro's socialist government, which of course controls all public institutions throughout the nation and has been accused of blatant election rigging in the past. Well, as it turns out, the elections were about as controversial as you would expect. While the official results declared Maduro the winner, it's being widely reported that the final results were widely discrepant from the initial exit polling data, which showed the opposition leader with a massive lead. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and the U.S. State Department have voiced their concerns over the integrity of the election and the election process. Some are actually blaming Biden for all of this, and that many see the election as a fallout from a deal that Biden struck with Venezuela some months back. What Biden did was he lifted a number of the sanctions against Venezuela in exchange for promises of fair elections. So it goes without saying that many are condemning the Biden administration for basically a naive and ineffective foreign policy. But concerns over the election aside, big picture, what we have to understand is what's happening in Venezuela is actually a very deep, complex situation. It's going to require us to put our geopolitical hats on. In many respects, Venezuela has become, over the last 2 decades, a tale of 2 different forms of populism. One populism sees the political threat as an external threat, a foreign threat coming from the outside, whereas the other populism sees the threat as internal, coming from within, a socialist government that refuses to leave. And in order to understand these 2 different populisms, we have to understand how Venezuela has actually become ground zero for a growing clash between 2 very different world orders. So on the one side, you have what's called the unipolar West, right? What's often referred to as the collective West. It's the United States and Europe, the bureaucrats in D.C. and Brussels that after the Cold War ended in 1991 sought to impose a one-size-fits-all liberal globalist order on the whole of the world. And while they claim that such an imposition was voluntary among member nations, many nations, especially those in Latin America, feel as if they're really nothing more than a client state inside the American-led hegemon, with their leaders more or less beholden to the will of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., far more than they are beholden to the will of Venezuelans. So make no mistake, this tension, this growing gap between the Venezuelan people and their historic leaders is precisely what Hugo Chavez exploited effectively back in the 90s. Chavez led a populist left revolt, a kind of Bernie Sanders revolt that married socialist economic policies with Venezuelan national sovereignty, that sought to overthrow a Venezuelan ruling elite that were supposedly more interested in doing the will of Washington rather than the will of the Venezuelan people. And Maduro has only continued that populist paradigm shift and made it even stronger. And so the key here is that Chavez and Maduro collectively and successfully redefined the enemy as a foreign threat, namely the dictatorial antics of the bureaucrats in D.C. and the architects of unipolarity, this one-size-fits-all world order that Venezuela is being forced into. And then on top of that, you got the recent move of Venezuela to join BRICS. Maduro made it clear that it is indeed his intention to join the growing economic alliance known as BRICS, which consists of nearly 50% of the world's population and global GDP. And we've talked a number of times on this channel about the significance of BRICS for what's being called a multipolar world. So that's a world with a number of political centers that puts a priority on cultural and civilizational sovereignty as over against the one-size-fits-all rules-based order enforced by a unipolar world. And so Venezuela's integration into BRICS would only end up solidifying that bloc's power over oil and the vast majority of the world's oil reserves. What we have to understand is that BRICS, with the recent inclusion of the three OPEC nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, BRICS is already the oil powerhouse of the planet, producing nearly 50% of the world's oil supply. But now, with the inclusion of Venezuela, which actually has the largest oil reserves in the world, BRICS would be the undisputed lord of the world's oil reserves. So make no mistake, Washington, which is the head of the unipolar world order, as over and against the multipolar world order as represented by BRICS, Washington has no interest in seeing Venezuela further integrate into this growing multipolar world order. And that only ends up further exacerbating the anti-Washington, anti-unipolar sentiments that Maduro and the populist socialists are able to effectively whip up among the Venezuelan people. But at the same time, you, of course, have more and more Venezuelans concerned that Maduro and the socialist government there are basically dictators that have no plans of ever leaving, ever. I mean, you've heard it said you can vote your way into socialism, but you can't vote your way out of it. Once you're in, nothing changes until the regime collapses. And that's, of course, what more and more Venezuelans voted for yesterday, to get rid of this crazy, insane socialist regime. So all of this is to say is that what we're seeing in Venezuela play out right now is nothing less than a clash between two nationalist populist factions in the nation. One that sees the threat as internal, a threat of socialist dictators who are ruling for their own gain and benefit rather than the gain and benefit of the people, versus a very large populist faction that sees the threat as external, a threat from the hegemons in D.C., who are bent on keeping Venezuela as a subservient client state in service to the unipolar world, which the socialists like Maduro are fighting against. So what this means is that regardless of what happens from yesterday's election, the clash between these two populist factions, one that sees the enemy within versus the other that sees the enemy without, is not about to end any time soon.